Yo, Savannah Britt just caught Joe McCann red-handed in the biggest lie of the entire century, and the internet is literally melting down right now. Bro really thought he could look into a camera, drop a couple of fake tears, and make everyone forget about what happened in Tanzania. But Ashlee Jenae's best friend didn't just break her silence. She pulled up with the actual receipts, the forensic timestamps, and the exact hotel logs that expose his entire timeline as a complete fabrication. We are talking about a multi-millionaire tech investor who allegedly spent 26 days rewriting history with a team of high-priced crisis managers, only for one single open letter on X to blow his whole operation to pieces. Think about it. How does a man claim he was asleep during the exact window the hotel staff registered a violent, screaming altercation? It makes zero sense, bro. The discrepancy is so massive that even his staunchest defenders are deleting their tweets and jumping ship. This isn't just a regular PR disaster anymore. This is a calculated cover-up that just collapsed in front of millions of people. If you want to see the exact moment Joe McCann's carefully crafted illusion completely shattered, don't blink. The official narrative around Joe McCann didn't just crack. It completely disintegrated the moment Savannah Britt stepped into the arena. To understand why this is the biggest exposure of 2026, you have to look at the sheer weight of the reputation Joe was trying to protect. For weeks, the public was fed this highly sanitized, lawyer-approved version of a grieving tech mogul who was simply too devastated by the loss of his fiancée, Ashlee Jenae Robinson, to speak to the media. The mainstream press treated him like a victim of a tragic, unexplainable sequence of events at the Zensai luxury resort in Zanzibar. But anyone who has been tracking this story from day one knows that the math never added up. You don't take 26 days to find your voice when the love of your life dies under highly suspicious circumstances. You don't scrub your digital footprint, hire a high-profile crisis PR firm from Los Angeles, and alter your public profiles unless you are actively playing defense. Joe thought his millions, his tech background, and his elite connections would allow him to outrun the storm. He assumed that because the tragedy occurred in a foreign country with complex jurisdictions, and an economy heavily reliant on shielding its tourism image, the truth would get buried under piles of bureaucratic paperwork. But he severely underestimated the power of an uncompromising best friend who knows exactly how the industry machinery operates. Savannah Britt didn't just launch an emotional attack. She executed a calculated, forensic takedown that targeted the foundation of Joe's defense. When Joe broke his silence on May 5th, he didn't realize he was walking straight into a trap that had been set for weeks. His statement was supposed to be the ultimate shield, a beautifully written piece of literature that praised Ashlee's cooking, her relationship with his kids, and her dreams of becoming a mother. It was designed to make you feel bad for him. It was designed to make the internet say, okay, let's give this man some space to heal. But the cracks were visible from the very first sentence. Savannah immediately called out the obvious, pointing out that while Joe was busy curating his soft-focus internet persona and polishing sentences that sounded like they were generated by an advanced AI algorithm, a grieving family in New Jersey was left in complete darkness. The contrast is jarring. On one side, you have a multi-millionaire founder of asymmetric technologies who has the resources to charter private flights, and on the other, you have Ashlee's parents, Harry Robinson and Yolanda Andres, who had to rely on a public GoFundMe campaign just to handle the massive costs of bringing their daughter's body back to American soil. The optics alone are enough to make you sick, brew. But the real damage lies in the specific lie that Savannah just exposed to the entire world. Joe's entire defense rested on the narrative that there was a minor, quiet misunderstanding that resulted in them being separated into different rooms, and that he later discovered the tragedy after hours of peaceful silence. He wanted everyone to believe he was completely detached from the final critical moments. But Savannah's open letter dropped a nuclear bomb on that exact timeline. She explicitly stated that the hotel staff didn't just hear an argument. They physically witnessed a violent, escalating altercation that completely contradicts the sanitized version of events given to the Zanzibar authorities. This means Joe's initial account wasn't just a misdirection. It was a deliberate, documented fabrication designed to protect his freedom and his assets. The public reaction shifted from confusion to absolute rage within seconds of Savannah's post hitting X. The internet collectively realized that we have been watching a masterclass in corporate damage control, not a genuine process of mourning. People are looking back at the past 4 weeks with a completely new lens, dissecting every single move Joe made while the family was suffering. The silence wasn't a product of grief. It was a tactical window used to align narratives, scrub potential digital evidence, and ensure that by the time he spoke, the legal risks were minimized. When you realize that his highly publicized tribute went live on the exact same day Ashlee was being laid to rest, the cruelty of the strategy becomes undeniable. It was a cynical attempt to control the media narrative at a time when the family was physically incapable of fighting back, because they were standing over a casket. This is where the mask completely slips off Joe McCann. He didn't see Ashlee's passing as a personal tragedy. He treated it like an adversarial legal threat that needed to be managed, mitigated, and suppressed through aggressive media positioning. The immediate fallout from this exposure has sent shockwaves through both the tech community in Portland and the international legal teams handling the case. Now that Savannah has put the hotel staff's eyewitness accounts into the public record, the original suicide ruling issued by the Zanzibar police looks completely illegitimate. Anonymous sources close to the luxury resort are now leaking information that the internal staff logs tell a drastically different story than what was released in the initial 5-day police report. There are whispers of leaked security footage from the resort corridors that shows the intensity of the conflict hours before Ashlee was transported to the hospital. This completely destroys the narrative of a peaceful separation. Legal experts are already pointing out that if Joe lied to international investigators about the physical nature of the altercation, he has opened himself up to massive criminal liability, both abroad and domestically. The United States Department of Justice has strict statutes regarding crimes committed against American citizens abroad, and when a wealthy individual uses their financial influence to potentially manipulate a foreign investigation, federal authorities take notice. The pressure on the Tanzanian government is mounting at an unsustainable rate. Zanzibar cannot afford to have its multi-million-dollar luxury tourism industry associated with a high-profile cover-up of a young Black American woman's death. If the public perceives that wealthy Western tech investors can visit these luxury resorts, engage in violent altercations that lead to fatalities, and simply fly away after paying for premium legal protection, it creates an international public relations nightmare for the country. There are already reports circulating that high-ranking officials within the Tanzanian judiciary are calling for a complete review of the files, demanding that the CCTV footage and the original unedited hotel staff statements be handed over to independent investigators. Joe's corporate entities are also facing an unprecedented crisis. Asymmetric Technologies is reportedly seeing a massive wave of internal panic, with investors and partners frantically looking for exit strategies to distance themselves from Joe's rapidly deteriorating reputation. In the tech and crypto venture capital space, your reputation is your currency, and right now, Joe McCann is radioactive. No major fund wants to be associated with a man whose name is trending alongside words like strangulation, suffocation, and forensic cover-up. There are serious talks behind closed doors about forcing Joe to step down from his managing partner role to salvage the millions of dollars in institutional capital tied up in his firm. The financial infrastructure he built to protect his wealth is beginning to crumble because Savannah Britt refused to let the news cycle move on. She understood that wealthy men like Joe rely on the short attention span of the internet. They know that if they can just stay quiet for 30 days, a new scandal will break, the public will find a new topic to obsess over, and they can slide back into their luxury lifestyles without ever answering a single hard question. But Savannah turned the internet into a digital courtroom, and the evidence she is presenting is so damning that a standard corporate statement cannot save him. The public backlash has transcended regular celebrity commentary. It has turned into a widespread movement demanding systemic accountability. The discrepancy between the local Tanzanian medical records listing cerebral hypoxia due to strangulation and the initial suicide narrative is the smoking gun that the public cannot ignore. You cannot reconcile those two facts. One of them is a lie, and Savannah just pointed the finger directly at the man who benefited the most from that lie. As the digital walls close in on Joe McCann, the strategic focus is shifting toward what will happen when this case inevitably lands in an American civil court. Savannah's open letter explicitly warned Joe that his weak, lawyer-penned scripts were simply providing more evidence for the courts, and she wasn't bluffing. Ashlee's parents are reportedly in deep consultations with high-powered civil rights and wrongful death attorneys in the United States. In a criminal court in Tanzania, Joe might have been able to leverage his immense wealth, and the local government's desire to protect tourism to keep himself out of a cell. But the American civil justice system operates on an entirely different standard. A wrongful death lawsuit does not require a criminal conviction. It requires a preponderance of evidence, meaning the family's legal team only has to prove that it is more likely than not that Joe's actions or altercations directly led to Ashlee's tragic end. With the hotel staff now verified as witnesses to a physical fight, the 11-hour delay before Joe contacted the parents, the missing engagement ring that is still being held as evidence, and the terrifying autopsy findings of suffocation, any civil jury in America would look at Joe with massive suspicion. The discovery phase of a U.S. civil lawsuit would be absolute catastrophic for Joe. He would be forced under oath to hand over every single text message, every encrypted WhatsApp communication, every email, and every financial transaction from the moment he landed in Zanzibar to the day he posted that fake tribute on X. His crisis PR team would be subpoenaed, forcing them to reveal the original drafts of his statements and proving whether or not he used AI tools like ChatGPT to manufacture a fake emotional response while trying to manage a legal crisis. The deposition process would strip away the soft, fatherly image his lawyers have spent weeks building. He wouldn't be able to hide behind a screen or release a calculated statement. He would have to answer raw, direct questions about why he left a woman he claimed to love forever in a foreign hospital for 11 hours without calling her mother. He would have to explain why a multi-millionaire let strangers on the internet fund the burial of his own fiancée. The social death certificate has already been signed, and the legal one is currently being drafted. Savannah Britt's intervention ensured that this case became a historical turning point for how the mysterious passings of Black women in foreign countries are handled by the media. The traditional playbook of waiting out the clock has officially failed. Joe McCann thought he was playing a high-stakes chess match against a grieving family, but he realized too late that Savannah Britt brought the entire internet to the board, and she just called checkmate. The tactical trap that Savannah Britt laid for Joe McCann is tightening by the hour, and the second phase of this exposure is diving straight into the dark, financial undertones that the mainstream media is completely terrified to mention. To truly dissect the magnitude of Joe's biggest lie, you have to look at the immediate aftermath of that physical altercation inside the luxury villa. The narrative Joe's team wanted you to buy was that after the quote-unquote misunderstanding, he gracefully retreated to a separate room, spent the night in peaceful isolation, and woke up to a horrific shock. But the leaked internal communications from the Zinsai luxury resort tell an entirely different, incredibly sinister story. Anonymous security personnel have reportedly admitted that the room separation wasn't a mutual decision made for space. It was an emergency intervention by hotel security, because the shouting match had escalated to a level that threatened the resort's strict policy on elite guest discretion. According to these unverified internal logs, Joe didn't spend the night sleeping. He spent the night on his phone, making frantic international calls to his corporate legal counsel and financial advisors in Portland. Let that sink in for a second, brew. While a young woman was entering a state of severe physical crisis inside that villa, a multi-millionaire tech investor was allegedly calculating the asset liability of a domestic dispute in a foreign jurisdiction. This explains the catastrophic 11-hour window that Harry Robinson and Yolanda Andres have been screaming about since day one. Joe didn't wait 11 hours because he was in shock. He waited 11 hours because his legal team was evaluating the geopolitical landscape of Tanzania, determining whether the local authorities would default to a tourism-friendly narrative or launch a full-scale homicide investigation. This brings us to the absolute core of the deception: the calculated weaponization of the local infrastructure. Joe McCann isn't just an average tourist with a deep pocket. He is the managing partner of Asymmetric Technologies, a firm that specializes in navigated financial systems, decentralized tech, and high-stakes international investments. He understands how developing economies protect their primary streams of revenue. Zanzibar's economy relies heavily on wealthy Western elites spending tens of thousands of dollars a night to isolate themselves in paradise. The last thing the local tourism ministry wants is a viral headline screaming that an American tech mogul was involved in a fatal domestic altercation at one of their flagship resorts. Savannah Britt exposed this exact intersection of wealth and corruption when she noted that Joe had plenty of time to update his digital profile pictures, but zero time to provide a cohesive timeline to the grieving family. The profile picture switch wasn't just a bizarre narcissistic move. It was a deliberate, psychological tactic. By changing his imagery to a soft-focus, approachable suburban father figure, his crisis team was preparing the American public for the second phase of their defense. The narrative that Joe is a peaceful, gentle family man who would never lift a finger against anyone. It was an optical preemptive strike against the brutal reality of the Tanzanian medical examiner's findings. When that local medical record leaked, listing cerebral hypoxia due to strangulation and suffocation, the entire defensive structure Joe built over 26 days vanished into thin air. In the world of forensic pathology, cerebral hypoxia means the brain was completely starved of oxygen. This doesn't happen from a minor misunderstanding, and it certainly doesn't align with the lazy, initial suicide narrative that the Zanzibar police tried to rush through to close the book. If a person is strangled or suffocated to the point of hypoxia, there is an immense, violent struggle. The hotel staff saw the physical fight hours prior, which means the timeline of events is completely contiguous. You cannot decouple the violent argument witnessed by the staff from the final forensic outcome of suffocation. Yet, Joe's May 5th statement completely omitted the word autopsy, completely omitted the word investigation. It used the phrase incomprehensible tragedy 3 separate times. Why? Because in a court of law, if you label something incomprehensible, you are legally establishing that you have no understanding of the cause, thereby absolving yourself of direct knowledge. It is standard first-year law school liability mitigation. Joe was speaking directly to future American civil jurors, trying to plant the seed that whatever happened in that room was a mysterious act of God, or a sudden mental health crisis that nobody could have predicted. But Savannah Britt checked him immediately on the mental health angle, exposing another massive layer of the cover-up. She pointed out that Joe's statement intentionally left out any mention of mental health struggles, while his digital internet bots and paid PR sycophants were simultaneously flooding TikTok and X with rumors that Ashlee was emotionally unstable. This is the classic textbook smear campaign used by wealthy men in high-profile domestic cases. They don't say the lie themselves. They write a sanitized public statement filled with love and past-tense eulogy speak, while their highly paid PR firms feed anonymous tips to trashy tabloid outlets to destroy the victim's character behind the scenes. They wanted the public to believe that Ashlee had a secret, dark struggle, so that the strangulation marks could be explained away as self-inflicted. But Savannah blew the whistle on the entire operation. By explicitly stating that Joe's own approved text contained 0 references to mental health, she forced him into a corner. If she was unstable, why didn't your heavily litigated statement say so? And if she wasn't unstable, why are your digital surrogates pushing suicide rumors to save your reputation? It was a masterful PR counteroffensive that exposed Joe's strategy as an uncoordinated, panicked mess. The hypocrisy reaches its absolute peak when you look at the missing engagement ring. Harry Robinson confirmed to international media that the multi-thousand-dollar diamond ring Joe used to propose just days earlier was seized by Tanzanian authorities and has mysteriously vanished from the inventory of returned personal effects. In a standard accidental death or suicide case, personal jewelry is handed over to the next of kin or the surviving fiancé within 48 hours. The only reason a piece of high-end jewelry is withheld for over a month under lock and key is if forensic technicians are scanning it for DNA, skin cells, or scratch marks that indicate a physical struggle. The ring isn't missing because of bureaucratic incompetence. The ring is being held because it is a piece of physical evidence that potentially links Joe's hands to the physical altercation the hotel staff witnessed. Joe knew this when he wrote his tribute. He knew that while he was typing about how Ashlee shined her light on everyone, a forensic lab in Dar es Salaam was actively processing the very ring he placed on her finger. The psychological dissonance required to execute a public relations campaign, while hiding these massive structural facts, is exactly why Savannah labeled the entire performance a disgusting, artificial word salad. As this information continues to bleed out into independent digital media channels, the institutional panic within Joe's circle has reached an all-time high. The cryptocurrency and venture capital projects he manages are quietly altering their website landing pages, removing his bio, and archiving press releases that bear his name. The tech elite in the Pacific Northwest operate on a highly fragile ecosystem of corporate social responsibility. They can tolerate a founder getting divorced. They can tolerate a founder tanking a company. but they absolutely cannot tolerate a founder whose name is systematically tied to an international forensic investigation involving the strangulation of a prominent black woman influencer. The racial and economic dynamic is driving the public outrage to a fever pitch, and no amount of corporate shielding can slow down the momentum. Joe thought he could treat this like a bad quarterly earnings report. Stay quiet, let the stock dip, and wait for the market to stabilize. But the internet isn't a market. It is a living, breathing archive that refuses to let his 26 days of calculated radio silence stand as a valid response to an incomprehensible tragedy. The transition from public outrage to concrete legal mobilization is already happening behind closed doors, creating a terrifying reality for Joe McCann's legal defense team. They realize that Savannah Britt's open letter didn't just sway public opinion. It laid out a precise step-by-step roadmap for a catastrophic American civil lawsuit. Every phrase Savannah used, every receipt she referenced, and every eyewitness account she brought to light is currently being cataloged by wrongful death attorneys who are preparing to bypass the corrupted, tourism-dependent criminal justice system of Zanzibar entirely. Joe thought that by escaping Tanzania with his passport, he had successfully outrun the jurisdiction of accountability. He truly believed that once he touched down on American soil, his wealth would create an impenetrable fortress. But he forgot that civil courts in the United States don't care about Zanzibar's desire to protect its luxury resort economies. They care about discovery, they care about cell phone tower dumps, they care about corporate email servers, and they care about the exact digital footprint he left behind while he was allegedly mourning his fiancée. The legal trap is officially set, and the final phase of this exposure is uncovering the terrifying reality of what happens when a multi-millionaire's calculated PR strategy collides with the absolute power of American civil discovery. Joe McCann genuinely believed that by managing the clock, he could dictate the terms of this narrative forever. He thought that once he survived the initial 26 days of radio silence and dropped his heavily litigated social media tribute, the public would accept the vagueness of his words and move on to the next viral headline. But the strategic brilliance of Savannah Britt's open letter didn't just disrupt his timeline. It completely weaponized his own statement to be used against him in a court of law. Legal analysts are now pointing out that Joe's decision to publish that specific, detailed tribute on X might go down as the most catastrophic blunder in the history of crisis management. By going public with a detailed account of his relationship, his feelings, and his timeline, Joe legally waived his right to privacy regarding those specific topics. He inadvertently opened the floodgates for Ashlee's parents, Harry Robinson and Yolanda Andres, to launch a scorched earth wrongful death civil suit on American soil that will completely strip away his corporate protection. In a criminal investigation within a foreign country, a wealthy defendant can hide behind the lack of resources, messy international extradition treaties, and a local police force that has a vested interest in protecting tourist dollars. But an American civil court operates on the rule of absolute financial and digital transparency during the discovery phase. This means Joe's fortress of millions is about to become his own prison. When the Robinson family lawyers file a wrongful death suit in a United States federal court, Joe McCann will not be able to rely on vague phrases like incomprehensible tragedy to evade questions. Under oath, during a deposition that will be recorded on video and entered into permanent legal records, he will be forced to answer for every single one of those 11 silent hours. He will be asked, under penalty of perjury, why a man with immediate access to international wire transfers and millions in crypto assets sat back and allowed strangers on a GoFundMe page to crowdsource $64,000 to bring his fiancée's body home. The civil defense lawyers can try to object all they want, but a jury will look at that single fact and see a chilling pattern of cold, detached calculation instead of a grieving partner. The discovery phase will go infinitely deeper than just his financial negligence. A federal judge can issue subpoenas that require Apple, Google, and the international telecom providers in Tanzania to hand over every single byte of deleted data from Joe's devices. The forensic tech teams will reconstruct the exact digital footprint he created inside that luxury villa at the Zinsai luxury resort. Every encrypted text message, every signal log, every WhatsApp conversation he had with his business partners and crisis PR managers, while Ashlee was entering a medical crisis, will be projected onto a massive screen in front of an American jury. If those digital forensic logs show that Joe was texting his crisis PR team, or checking his investment portfolios before he called the local medical staff or reached out to Ashlee's mother, the civil case is effectively over. The jury won't just award damages. They will hit him with punitive penalties designed to completely ruin him financially. Savannah Britt knew exactly what she was doing when she closed her open letter by telling Joe that his weak scripts were just more evidence for the courts. She was signaling to his legal team that the independent media ecosystem has already archived every single contradiction, and they are ready to hand it over to the family's attorneys. The corporate fallout from this digital warfare is already causing a massive, irreversible chain reaction within asymmetric technologies and the broader Pacific Northwest venture capital circle. Wealthy tech investors are notoriously risk-averse when it comes to reputational scandals involving violence or systemic deception. They can survive a market crash, and they can survive a federal regulatory probe, but they cannot survive being associated with a founder who is publicly accused of leveraging his wealth to suppress a forensic investigation into the suffocation of a prominent Black lifestyle influencer. Sources inside the tech community are leaking information that institutional investors are already demanding an immediate, independent audit of Joe's corporate communication servers to ensure that no company resources or corporate funds were used to pay for the crisis PR firms or the digital bot networks that tried to smear Ashlee's mental health online. If it is discovered that corporate assets were used to manage Joe's personal legal crisis in Zanzibar, it creates a massive breach of fiduciary duty, giving his partners the legal right to completely strip him of his shares, remove his name from the firm, and kick him out of the industry forever. What Joe and his high-priced PR advisors completely failed to understand is that the modern media landscape has completely evolved past the point where a mainstream media blackout can save you. In the past, if an elite figure could get a few major legacy publications to run neutral, sympathetic headlines framing a tragedy as a tragic accident with no charges filed, the story would die. But in 2026, the culture is completely driven by independent digital creators, investigative commentary channels, and highly coordinated communities on TikTok, Instagram, and X who refuse to let the powerful dictate the truth. This new media ecosystem doesn't care about standard journalistic gatekeeping or corporate legal threats. They look at the raw receipts. They look at the Tanzanian medical records showing cerebral hypoxia from strangulation. They look at the hotel staff's eyewitness accounts of a violent physical fight. They look at a missing engagement ring being held as evidence by international technicians. They connect those dots in real time, creating a viral tidal wave of public accountability that no traditional public relations playbook can stop or control. Joe McCann didn't just lose the plot. He completely signed his own social and professional death certificate the moment he treated a human tragedy like a corporate liability management campaign. He thought he was the smartest man in the room, playing a calculated game of public relations chess against a family that was too broken by grief to fight back. But he forgot that a true friend doesn't wait for permission to demand justice. Savannah Britt turned his own calculated silence into a weapon, and she used his own May 5th statement as the definitive proof of his deception. Every single move he makes from this point forward will only accelerate his downfall. If he stays quiet, his silence will be viewed as an absolute admission of guilt in the court of public opinion. If he opens his mouth to release another statement, the independent media will dissect every single syllable within minutes, exposing the lies and pointing out the contradictions. He has painted himself into a corner with absolutely no exit strategy, and the walls are closing in rapidly. The cultural impact of this case is already stretching far beyond the borders of Portland or the beaches of Zanzibar. This is turning into a historic reckoning for how the lives and safety of Black women traveling abroad are treated by international authorities and wealthy elites. The public is making it clear that wealth will no longer buy a path to unaccountable silence. 5 years from now, when people look back at this moment in internet history, they won't remember the sanitized, lawyer-approved paragraphs Joe McCann posted on X. They will remember the absolute bravery of a best friend who refused to let a multi-millionaire rewrite history. They will remember the timeline, the forensic receipts, and the absolute collapse of a corporate cover-up in front of millions of viewers. Joe McCann's biggest lie has been exposed to the entire world. The ink is dry, the digital archive is permanent, and the real legal battle hasn't even begun. And that is the brutal truth that the corporate PR machines desperately wanted to bury under the rug. Joe McCann thought his millions could buy the ultimate silence, but the receipts don't lie, and the internet never forgets. Savannah Britt just showed the entire world what true loyalty looks like, turning a calculated damage control campaign into an absolute checkmate. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think the American civil courts will finally force Joe McCann to break his silence under oath? What do you think about the multi-millionaire fiancé letting strangers fund Ashlee's journey home? And how do you feel about the hotel staff completely shattering his timeline? Drop your thoughts, your theories, and your analysis in the comments below, because we need to keep this conversation alive. If you believe that wealth should never buy a way out of accountability, and you want to make sure Ashlee Jenae's name is never forgotten, smash that like button right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications so you never miss a single update as we continue to follow the paper trail, connect the dots, and expose the real stories that everyone else is too terrified to touch. Stay locked in.